Welcome to the Expect Success Podcast, a presentation of GeorgeBollick.com with your host, George Bollick. This podcast is for all things personal development. Don't expect success, prepare for it. Please welcome your host, George Bollick.
Welcome to Expect Success at GeorgeBollick.com. Now, in addition to listening to our podcast, you could also view the video format on YouTube at GeorgeTube.com. Michio Kaku is an American theoretical physicist, futurist, and popularizer of science as a science communicator. He is a professor of theoretical physics in the city of New York and CUNY Graduate Center. Throughout today's episode, you will learn about the power of Moore's Law. Moore's Law attempts to predict the future of silicon chips. Listen to Michio.
One way to predict the future is to look at Moore's Law. Moore's Law says that computer power doubles every 18 months. So if you put it on a chart, you can actually see where certain technologies kicked in and where people were ahead of the game or behind the eight ball and lost out by simply looking at Moore's Law. For example, look at IBM. IBM was king of the heap back in the 1950s, but if you look at Moore's Law, you would basically see that supercomputers would be replaced by cell phones. Your cell phone today has more computer power than all of NASA in 1969 when they put 2 men on the moon. That's the power of Moore's Law. And sure enough, what happened to all the gigantic computers of IBM? They're museum pieces, because they didn't see the future. What rose up in the ashes? Microsoft. Microsoft saw that yes, Moore's Law is going to take us into the realm of personal computers, but even they almost missed the boat. You realize that Bill Gates wrote a best-selling book, The Road Ahead. He was predicting the future. But if you read the book very carefully, you realize there's something missing in that book, and that is the internet. He was predicting a world where we would all have standalone computers that just stood by themselves but were very powerful. What are those kinds of computers called? They're called museum pieces. Nobody has computers today that are not connected to the internet. And so Microsoft almost blew it because they failed to see the coming of the next entry in Moore's Law, the coming of small computers that you can put in a cell phone. And they're connected by the internet. And now, of course, we have yet another revolution coming. And again, Microsoft is playing catch up to that. And we're talking about 5G technology where everything's wired up and it's just not on a cell phone, it's basically everywhere and it's hooked up to artificial intelligence. So, seeing the future is actually not so hard. By looking at Moore's Law, you could see that we would go from the era of mainframes to the era of PCs, to the era of the internet, to the era of cell phone type technologies. And next, artificial intelligence. It don't take a great genius to see that, but so many companies ignore it and think we're number one. Unless you can see the future, you go bankrupt.
That's awesome. For more from Michio Kaku, simply search YouTube. And you can find his very interesting Twitter feed at Michio Kaku. One of my favorite books of his, The Future of Humanity, is available in every format known to man on Amazon.com. I'll include a link in the show notes. And remember, as the late great Jim Rohn used to say, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Today you've been hanging out with Michio Kaku. Keep up the momentum. Subscribe to our newsletter so you never miss another episode. We'll catch you on the next show, and thanks a million for listening. See ya.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Expect Success Podcast with your host, George Bollick. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please rate, subscribe, and review. And find more great content online at GeorgeBollick.com and on Facebook and Twitter at George Bollick. We'll catch you next time. And remember, don't just expect success, prepare for it.